All right, welcome to this heart anatomy and physiology video where we're going to be covering the circulatory aspect of the heart and how it's going to be involved with the two circuit systems that is involved in the cardiovascular system. So when it comes to your cardiovascular system, there are two circulation systems that is involved with. One is called the pulmonary circuit and one is called the systemic circuit. In this case, in this video, we're going to be discussing how the heart is involved in pumping blood in the individual circuits themselves. When it comes to the heart, let's start with the pulmonary circuit. So the pulmonary circuit's purpose is to make sure that the blood that is coming from the heart goes to the lungs for reoxygenation purposes and then comes back to the heart itself. In terms of the specific structures that are involved, this is going to be the right side of the heart, where blood is going to be pumped out through the pulmonary arteries, and it's going to go into the left and right lungs for reoxygenation, and then it's going to come back to the heart through these pulmonary veins. So let's look inside the heart in terms of how this circulation looks like. So here we have the cross section of the heart, and let's start by following the flow of blood that's going to be involved in the pulmonary circuit. So we have the right atrium here, we have the right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. In terms of the pulmonary circuit, once the blood enters through the superior and the inferior vena cava into the right atrium is going to push the blood into the right ventricle past the tricuspid valve. So the tricuspid valve is making sure that the blood flows in one direction, and when the ventricles push the blood out, it does not go back into the right atrium itself. So when the blood is being pushed from the right atrium into the right ventricle, the tricuspid valves are open and the blood now enters into the right ventricle. After that, the right ventricle is now going to contract and is going to push the blood out through the pulmonary arteries. For this purpose, we have the pulmonary valves right here, one of the semilunar valves. This is now going to open up so the blood can flow through into the pulmonary arteries, and the tricuspid valves will now close, making sure the blood does not go back towards the right atrium. From the right ventricle, the blood is now going to enter through the pulmonary trunk, going into the left and right pulmonary arteries to the respective lungs for reoxygenation. So the blood in this case is oxygen poor. It's going to go to the lungs where it's going to pick up fresh oxygen from the air, and then it's going to come back towards the heart itself. So let's go to the posterior view. And here we have the pulmonary veins highlighted in G. This is the veins that are now going to come back from the individual lungs with oxygen-rich blood towards the left atrium. So again, we're rotating back into the heart where the oxygen-rich blood is now coming back into the left atrium from the individual lungs themselves. This is now where we're going to enter into the other circuit that is involved in the cardiovascular system, and that is the systemic circuit, where the blood is now going to be pumped towards the rest of the body, delivering that fresh oxygen for the body tissues to respire, to create energy, and do all the various work that cells do. So the blood is now going to enter into the left atrium with that oxygen-rich blood, and the left atrium is going to then push that blood into the left ventricle. In this case, it's going to go past this atrioventricular valve here called the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve. This is again making sure that the blood is moving only in this direction from the left atrium into the left ventricle and not the other way. Once the left ventricle fills up with blood, then the left ventricle will push that blood out past the aortic valve shown here. This is the other semilunar valve, and is going to then enter into the aortic arch, where eventually it will get distributed throughout the body. In this case, when the left ventricle is pumping blood past the aortic valve, the bicuspid valve will now close to make sure that the blood does not go back towards the left atrium. The other thing you should note here is when you look at the walls of the left ventricle compared to the right ventricle, you will see that the wall is significantly thicker because the myocardial layer here, which is the muscular layer, has to generate a lot of force to make sure that the blood goes towards the rest of the body. As opposed to the right ventricle, part of the pulmonary circuit, the myocardial layer here is not as thick because here the blood has to go to the neighboring organs where you have the lungs on either side of the heart itself. Going back, now that the heart has pumped blood out from the left ventricle into the aorta, the blood is then going to get distributed towards the various body tissues with that oxygen-rich blood delivering that fresh oxygen the body tissues are going to pick up that fresh oxygen, and then the blood will be returned back to the heart as part of the closed circuit, coming back towards the right atrium via the superior vena cava right here and the inferior vena cava right here, where the blood is going to enter into the right atrium and is going to now start the pulmonary circuit. This is the reason why we describe the cardiovascular system as a two-circuit system, and as well as being a closed system, where the blood is not only being pushed out of the heart, but it returns back to the heart, making it a closed system. Thanks for listening in.